emergency, you have the air. Shot fired. I think you heard off the shot clock. Officer 3751 South Polk at a 10-1.
And this weekend in Chicago, the Lollapalooza Rock Fest was here in Grant Park. And this festival is a large undertaking that diverts a lot of resources for this event. But everything was peaceful there. A couple of people crashed the gates, but it was a successful weekend for Lollapalooza in Chicago. The month of July in Chicago was a violent one. And over the month of July, 328 people were shot, 40 were killed, and 288 were wounded. The total number of homicides, 45. I missed all of the month of July due to injuries, but went back over the first weekend in August, and it was every bit as violent as I thought it would be. What you are about to see is graphic and disturbing. This is 3 days in the most violent neighborhoods of Chicago.
Houston 4 on the citywide, get one single shot fired, 8 till impact, and 87. 2 shots fired, details to follow still. Zone 8, we're clear.
The first shooting I covered took place in the Rogers Park neighborhood. A 25-year-old man was riding a bicycle at Ashland and Farewell when an unknown person inside a white Ford Focus fired shots, striking the man in the leg. A citizen passing by drove him to St. Francis Hospital, where he is now listed in stable condition. The shooter or shooters are still at large, and Area North detectives are investigating. Shootings happen so often here in Chicago that even the pigeons know not to cross the crime scene tape. Chicago cops responded early Saturday morning to a shot spotter alert and discovered a 27-year-old man laying outside with multiple gunshot wounds to the body and a 25-year-old man with a gunshot wound to the leg. This happened at 80th and Stewart in the Chatham neighborhood. The older man is in critical condition, while the other man is currently in stable condition. Both were transported to the University of Chicago Hospital. There are currently no witnesses to the shooting, and the victim in critical condition is unable to communicate, while the younger man is currently being uncooperative with cops. No surprise. There was a large amount of shots fired in this incident. The shell casings are proof of that. Area South detectives are investigating, and according to the CPD, both men are known to cops. After the Chatham shooting, a man was shot in a porch at 123rd and Emerald in the West Pullman neighborhood. Now, only one shot was fired in this incident from the corner, and the one bullet struck the man in the chest, possibly entering his lung. The man is listed in critical condition. The shooter is still at large, and an investigation is ongoing. You know, a lot of people think that these neighborhoods are really, really bad. And it's not necessarily true from my perspective. You know, I drive through these neighborhoods and I see everybody out, kids playing, perfectly normal. At night, the adults play and they have their block parties, and everybody on the block and the surrounding blocks, they all get together and party. And then the shooter appears and takes a neighborhood that's normal and turns it into a war zone. Saturday turned out to be a very violent day here in Chicago. And on Saturday evening, the first shooting I covered took place on 22nd and Damon in the heart of Chicago neighborhood. a 17-year-old male was a passenger in a traveling vehicle when he was shot 3 times in the arm by an unknown shooter. The teen stated he didn't know where the shots came from and did not see the shooter. He was transported to Stroger in stable condition after a friend drove him to the hospital. No one is in custody, and area central detectives are investigating. I said some things I didn't like about the new mayor, her policies mainly. And a lot of people were upset with that. But the reason why I said what I said was because her speech about redoing these neighborhoods, bringing businesses, I've heard it all before from multiple mayors throughout my life. But something happened about 2 weeks ago. The mayor said, "I fear we've lost the streets." Now, she might be right. But in a leadership position, you should never admit defeat. Because the people of these neighborhoods now have no hope. It demoralizes the cops. And she's only been in just over 2 months. Let me give you a piece of advice, Mrs. Mayor. You need to do the hard thing. And that is to stop the shootings or bring these numbers way down. You know what you have to do. I just don't think you have the heart to do it. Because no businesses will come into these neighborhoods until they're cleaned up. You see, the city can't force businesses to come in these neighborhoods. The city doesn't create businesses. The public creates businesses. So the key to changing these neighborhoods is to go after the gun offenders and the gangs. Nobody's really had the balls to do it. To do what really has to be done. They know where the guns are. They know what to do. They just won't let them do it. So prepare for a tough 4 years with this mayor.
671 Robert.
It was about 1 a.m. Saturday, and I was
671 Robert. We were in
sitting minding my own business in the North Lawndale neighborhood, parked on the side of the road, when here they came. The squad started pouring in. The radio lit up with calls for as many ambulances as they can get to the scene at Douglas Park. Little did I know, I was driving right into the aftermath of a mass shooting. I showed up on the scene a couple of minutes after the shots were fired, and cops, firemen, and paramedics were rushing onto the scene to help the 5 of the 7 people shot that were left on the scene. It was total mass chaos. People were wandering around trying to find their belongings. Others directly told me how bullets were flying everywhere. People hit the ground and others ran. And this guy told me, shaking his head, it was just a block party, and we were just out partying, enjoying the nice weather in the park, when the Camaro showed up and the gunfight began. In this one incident, 7 people were wounded in this mass shooting in Douglas Park. While I was filming this, I could clearly see the pain and fear in these young ladies' eyes that were shot sitting on the ground. Their eyes, to me, depict the pain and suffering going on in the most violent neighborhoods of Chicago. I have to say, both were beautiful young ladies with a lot of potential. I don't know exactly when the change in gang-related shootings of women became acceptable. Gang business here in Chicago is understood, and the gang member upon gang member shootings and killings are mostly business related. But these public everyone is a target shootings will only bring more cops and feds to these neighborhoods. The shooting of women and kids is where we as a society, along with these communities, need to draw the line. And I don't think the neighborhood code should apply to people like this.
Okay, thank you all for being here today. Before we get started, I want to first convey my deepest condolences to the people of Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas, and most certainly the citizens of this city who've been affected by just a tragic level of violence within a society that's become immune to these types of shootings. So I'm going to stop myself from becoming political here, but you have to stop and ask yourself, what more will it take before we get a handle on what's going on, not just in Chicago, but across the country? From police departments to the court systems, to prosecutors, to legislators. We have to come together and figure out common sense solutions to these problems, because clearly too many of our citizens are being shot and killed. And what really infuriates me is that we really have the power to do something about it. I just don't know if we have the will to do it. Here in Chicago, we experienced an unacceptable and disheartening level of gun violence on the west side last night. We had several incidents here in the Ogden community that are exploring, and we are exploring potential connections, notably 2 multi-victim shooting incidents. Our first multi-victim incident was in the 2900 block of Roosevelt Avenue, Douglas Park, around 1 a.m. this morning. Now, we know that a Camaro pulled into the park and engaged another group in a gun battle. We have multiple types of ballistics from this particular incident and believe that several of our victims returned fire, possibly up to 4 or 5 different people shooting at one time. After that, around 2 a.m., we had another shooting in the 1200 block of South Troy Street. In that incident, 2 females were non-fatally wounded by gunfire, and we're currently working with them to get a better idea as to what may have prompted the attack. At 3:30 a.m., we had another multi-victim shooting in the 4200 block of West 18th Street. As of now, 8 victims have been shot in this incident, with one of them suffering fatal injuries. Area Central detectives are still out on this one, and information is coming in slowly. Some of our victims have, quite honestly, been less than forthcoming in cooperating with us.
Hours later, I went back to the scene to take a look at how many shots were fired in this incident. And to my surprise, there were over 50 shell casing markers scattered from the park to at least a block away. I can't stress this point enough to you, the public. No politicians or police agency is responsible for the heinous criminal acts of an individual like this. The person that shot at the party full of people of all ages is solely responsible for this act. And there will always be people trying to blame others for the acts of the individual. And don't forget this: evil comes in all different colors, shapes, and sizes. And this act was pure evil with no street cred of any kind attached to it.
Shots came from the rear.
It is a real mess out here. Just come off of a shooting where a bunch of women were shot. And now I'm heading to another shooting on Troy. This happens every time. They come out and tout these low shooting numbers without fail. The streets then go up for grabs. And that's what's happening here. So I'm on my way to Troy for another shooting. I'm about 6 blocks away.
do me a favor? Do you mind backing up just a little bit to the front end of that car for me? Thank you.
2 women were shot on 13th and Troy in the North Lawndale neighborhood at a street party. This shooting was blocks away and was directly after the mass shooting of 7 people in Douglas Park. The women were standing on the street when shots were fired. The first female was self-transported to Mount Sinai in stable condition with a gunshot wound to the left hand. And the second woman was transported to Stroger in stable condition with a gunshot wound to the butt and the hip. The shooter or shooters are still at large. Area Central is investigating. West Side went up for grabs tonight. 7 people were just shot in Douglas Park. 2 people were just shot here blocks away.
Do we have a unit available for that?
And there's a ton of parties out here that are out of control. And these big groups of people are targets for the shooters. I don't think they give a shit who they shoot at or what they shoot at. They just shoot into the crowd, and it's a tough way to live out here. 3 people were shot at Potomac and Parkside in the Austin neighborhood. The victims were standing outside of a vehicle when 2 male shooters emerged from an alley and fired several shots in their direction. The victims drove to West Suburban Hospital. 2 men and 1 adult female were shot in this incident. No one is in custody. Area North is investigating. We got a guy shot on 18th and Kildare. Another West Side shooting. Rolling there now. In this mass shooting, 8 people were shot, and 1 man was killed, and 7 other partygoers were wounded at a block party at 18th and Kildare in the Lawndale neighborhood. This was the last mass shooting of the night. It was a very violent night filled with multiple person shootings across the west side of the city. 3 people were originally reported shot in this incident. And one of the reasons was because I was on the back half of the block and the shooting took place on the front half of the block. And the way it was taped off, I couldn't see down the block. And multiple people self-transported to the hospital, and people that were at the party weren't sure how many were shot. This was another very chaotic shooting scene filled with scared and shocked people just trying to get the hell out of there. The man's name that was killed is Demetrius Flowers, age 33. He was struck in the chest and died at Mount Sinai Hospital. Flowers' father later said that it's the second son he's lost to violence. Please stop, he said. It's killing our families. It's destroying the fiber of our communities. We have to stop this senseless killing, because if we don't, there's nothing going to be left. The 4 men, a teen boy, and 2 women were listed from fair to stable condition. And according to CPD, witnesses were not cooperating with area detectives. The Chicago Police Department said that it believes all the West Side mass shootings were gang or drug related. On Monday, the Chicago police released this audio of the shooting as it happened. real fucker of a night, you know? It's one of these nights that, shouldn't have happened. But it did. After multiple party-related mass shootings in the Lawndale neighborhood, the Chicago cops were given orders to shut down the remaining parties that were going on into the early morning hours Sunday on the west side. The local area trauma center, Mount Sinai Hospital, was so overwhelmed with shooting victims, it couldn't take anymore. Some had to be sent to other trauma centers in the area, and the last time this happened was the 3rd week of August last year. Well, the sun is coming up, and that means this day is just about over. It has been one violent fucking night here in Chicago. It's hard to watch day after day, but it's what I do. Now we got another guy shot over here on Congress. I think tonight I've been on 6 crime scenes, over 20 people shot. I gotta be honest, I could really do without all of this, but it's what I've chosen to do. It's Sunday evening and the end of the weekend. Hoping for a better day today than yesterday. A man and a woman were in a car traveling southbound at 69th and Wentworth in the Greater Grand Crossing neighborhood, when the shooter in a silver sedan pulled up alongside their car and fired at least a half-dozen shots at them. The driver, 21-year-old Cornelius Jordan, then struck a light pole after fatal gunshot wounds to the torso. He was pronounced dead on the scene. The female was his 20-year-old girlfriend, and she was pregnant. She was shot multiple times in the arm and taken to UIC in stable condition. Cornelius Jordan had a son and a baby girl on the way. Area South is investigating, and the shooter is still at large. This was the last shooting and killing in a very long and violent weekend in Chicago. I would like to introduce you to Grim. Grim is my friend John's dog, and he has 2 other young Malinois just like this. Now, I was recently in Missouri for a funeral, and I met a man named Nate walking around with 4 Belgian Malinois. Nate trains and breeds these dogs. He has a company called Mountain Malinois in Thayer, Missouri. Now, I told him what I do in Chicago, and we talked about finding me the right tempered dog that could possibly become my new partner, that will roam the streets of Chicago with me. Now, it has gotten to the point that I need a second set of eyes in the back of my head. A dog like this, properly trained, will provide that for me. The intelligence and strong work ethic makes this breed the perfect fit for what I need. Now, I'm considering making the commitment to incorporate a dog like this into what I do. Let me know what you think.
Come on.
Now, over the long weekend, 7 people were killed and 52 others were wounded in shootings across Chicago. I would like to highlight this shooting that happened last week. Andrea Stoudemire had 3 children, and Chantel Grant had 4. And they were members of a community group called MASK, Mothers Against Senseless Killings. They were both shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Inglewood when a blue SUV pulled on the 7500 block of South Stewart and fired shots into a crowd, killing Grant and Stoudemire and wounding another man. CPD claims they were not the intended targets. The bullets were meant for the man who was affiliated with a Chicago street gang that recently got out of prison. These ladies worked hard to help their communities, and they both deserve our respect and admiration for trying to make a difference in their communities. They died at the hands of the cause they were fighting against. Their names and faces should not be forgotten. Rest in peace, ladies. Maggio News, signing off.